evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 13th, 2020 Planning Board meeting. If we could first, as we always do, please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, all. All right, so before we get into correspondence that we received, I did get 2 emails myself, a little critical about the way the Atlantic Appliance public hearing was held. I have had a chance to discuss it with town council. I think we were in the right. We are doing some homework on it. I did take one of the emails really to heart, and I promise you I will work on this. But the author said that she used to repeat things to her children all the time, and to just sort of reinforce that this is what and why. And I take that to heart because I get that from my children all the time. They tell me I'm repeating myself when I say, sometimes I do it just to hear myself say it so that I know you've heard me. But we did start to have conversation about the way we conduct public hearings, and we did get some correspondence about it. So I'll leave it up to the group for an open discussion. I know, Aaron, you want to lead? Oh, you're on mute.
It's an important balance between the right of the public to participate in public hearings that we hold and the obligation of the board to move things along and enable as many people to speak as possible without necessarily repeating ourselves. What we have in the past had no particular limits on the length of time of a speaker could talk. I would recommend that we adopt a resolution setting forth some guidelines in the way we conduct public hearings. And one of the things I would consider and urge the board to consider is that we impose a 5-minute time limit on the initial round of speakers. Everyone has the right at that point to file additional comments in writing, which of course become part of the record and are reviewed by the board. But I think a 5-minute limit would enable us to move our business along and yet give ample opportunity for people to raise issues and comments for the public hearings.
I agree.
I agree wholeheartedly. Any other members of the board want to discuss it?
I think it's within your purview, Rich, to remind people that, comments that are pertinent to the instant application are those that we would really be anxious to hear, not, commentaries on other communities and what, color their houses are or restrictions they place on residents that do not have any, influence on the applications that we're trying to consider, positive and negative aspects of in regard to our community. I think that's well within your purview as the chairman, and just to remind people of that. But I think 5 minutes should be ample time to state a case. I think it's important that people that do want to agree with a former speaker should have the opportunity to get up and state their agreement without expounding on the whole argument all over again, but to be part of the record, to come out and state affirmatively that they do agree with the prior speaker's comments or that they disagree, and be part of the record and have their name be counted and their voice be heard. And if it's going to be an extended dissertation, that they send that to us in writing after they have the chance to state their agreement or disagreement. And that can be agreement or disagreement with an application as well. So, I think that's important. They should speak to the application and our responsibility in reviewing an application and try and keep it on point. I agree that over and over again, we seem to suffer the further instruction and interpretation of laws that have been adopted by the town when we're quite well aware what the laws are. And, we do our best to consider every aspect of all of the town laws when we consider applications. And we discuss them in depth, obviously. So without speaking more than 5 minutes, that's all I have to say.
I agree. And I think what is very important is we are extremely lucky in Yorktown and our board to have John, Robin, sometimes Thomas, and Nancy in the planning office, to guide us. Listen, I don't want to talk about how long John's been working for the town, but he's probably drafted or had input in every one of the codes that have been put in place. And intimate knowledge. Again, when I sat on that tree committee to watch the dialogue between the people that really know him, basically was Linda Miller and John Pegater, going back and forth, I felt like I was in a class. Unbelievable knowledge. But John and his team are there to guide us and to help us and to give us backing, answer questions when we need. We have Jim, who is been an excellent, very vocal attorney for us, and the board itself, the background of the board. But I think it's also important for people to remember that we're also volunteers. And I got one email and a very concerned person about one of the applications. And as we've seen in a bunch of these emails that have come in about the applications, that we should be out as a board promoting properties. And as we've had discussions before, that is not in our purview. And I want people to understand that as much as we feel exactly the same way you do in some respects, that we want to see these storefronts filled and that we want to see some of these buildings get occupied, we can't go out and solicit these things. I feel it would just ethically, not only that it's not part of our purview, and I think the residents should know that the town board is working aggressively towards some of these things. I know this Reboot Yorktown committee, they've been working on a lot of things. I'm sure there's a lot of things that will come out soon, but so let's work on getting some language together. I guess what we just discussed, John, if we could put together kind of something that we could eventually agree upon and vote on, would that work?
As a resolution for the time limits and so forth?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll work with Jim on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Everybody on board with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And I just want to talk about the agenda tonight because, I know there's a lot of people that are interested in certain applications. The only application where there will be public comment is on the Taco Bell public hearing. That's the third on the agenda. The rest of the hearings have been closed to the public, and we're given written time limits to bring right in, your concerns, your complaints, and we've gotten some. So at this point, for the public's input, the only one that we're hearing any comment on tonight would be the Taco Bell. Jim, I'm not incorrect in that, right?
You're correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. That being said, does anybody else want to talk about any more of the correspondence that we have tonight? Did I miss anything?
Chairman, if I may, I just want to, I just want to reiterate what you said, where there's an ethical guideline that you have to follow, and even though the board holds the title of planning board, it's not that you're planning every move in the town, which is what I think some of the mistakes are there. You're there to make sure that any of the jobs coming in or any of the buildings coming in fit what our planning codes are, and it's it is all volunteer, and I think that we have one of the better planning boards that I've seen out there. So I wanted to reiterate that. I also do want to reiterate the fact that the Reboot Yorktown task force, their job is being being tasked as marketing these properties and seeing what we could do to get people in there and get the spots filled. And we have to give them the time. I know COVID has slowed down one of the plans of doing a traveling open house on the properties with businesses out of the city. And we're going to keep pushing that as a town board. Reboot Yorktown, the chamber. It's forefront in what we want to do. So just to push forward a little of that, and thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Johnson. Anybody else?
I have a couple of things, Rich.
Okay. Oh, yes, John, sorry.
That's okay. So just a little report on the Prebeck subdivision. We've been working with Jim and Enzo, who's the applicant. I think we're getting close to solving the issue with the open space parcel and a couple of the easements and the road widening strips. So we should be getting those deeds, and I think that'll be solved and be able to come back to you to just move along. So just wanted to let you know that. I don't know if Jim has anything to add to that, or.
No, I think, John, you said it. We've narrowed everything down to a few issues that are solvable paperwork issues.
Right. And then the next one is tomorrow the town board is taking up the solar law again. And since it was last on, there have been some changes. There's not a lot of changes, and I did email you today a red line copy of what has been modified the last time you saw it. So since you have only in your next meeting in August, that if you could look at that and I'll take your comments by email if you have any. I'm not sure that you will. And I'll be happy to explain any of the minor amendments that were made and the reasons for them. And then I can put together a memo for the town board for subsequent meeting, which probably will be before you meet next. So,
Thank you, John.
that's all I have.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, then why don't we go to John Kincard's favorite portion of the meeting, the minutes. Tonight we have the meeting minutes of June 22nd, 2020. Does anybody have any comments? I love you, John.
I wasn't there, but I thought they were very well done.
Yes.
Gotta make a motion.
Here. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll
Motion.
abstain under the circumstances.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to move into the regular session portion of the meeting. First on the agenda is 387 Granite Springs. This is a decision statement. Location is the same. Contacts American Custom Builders. Are they on? Oh, Elliot, you're muted.
That's better.
Yes.
I don't know if you wanted to do a presentation or is this just for resolution?
So we have the resolution in front of us. Have you had a chance to look at it?
We have.
We also
We have
have
no,
neck.
we have no comments.
John, oh,
Yeah, this one came out late in the day, so I just want to make sure you have the red line copy from this afternoon.
yes.
I do,
Apologies for the lateness.
Blame it, Thomas.
Poor Thomas.
No, it's true. All right, anything else we got to discuss, John, other than what's in front of us?
I don't think so. We did make note of the tree mitigation since, we are using the tree law for the first number of times, this
Yep.
being them. So it does state how many trees are taken out and how many are being offered for mitigation. So just wanted to make a note of that is in there for you.
Yes. I think it's important too, because I know when, I think we were all there when the town board adopted the tree code a while ago, there was a real outcry that, I think there was one application where people didn't realize that they get these applications as they come and get forwarded to a multitude of boards and agencies and interested people. And, I think later in the meeting, you're going to see we have at least one letter from the tree board on an application. So we do get input back, and we take the input very serious. We none of these boards, the conservation board, any of these boards, when they come to us, there was a letter from the rec board, we take that very serious. And that is what guides us, as does the input from the public. So has everybody had a chance to take a look at the late breaking resolution?
Yes.
Any issues? Any issues with the neg deck? We missing anything, Jim?
Nothing. You're ready to go.
All right. That being said, do I have a motion to approve the neg deck in front of us?
Motion.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Then we have a resolution approving a stormwater pollution prevention permit, a wetland permit, a tree permit, and a subdivision plat titled 387 Granite Springs Road. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody abstain? No? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Elliot. Nice work.
Thank you. Have a good night.
So, okay. Move on to the next item. Atlantic Appliance. This is also a decision statement. Locations 201010 Maple Street. Again, this was a closed public hearing. There was a 10-day written comment period. There were some people that did comment. Is Tim Miller on?
Steve is.
No, but Steve Marino's here in his place.
Sorry, Steve.
Look at Steve.
Would you like to go over the letter we just got recently today? Talk about it, please.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Planning Department just asked that we present a summary of the mitigation plans in terms of, the tree impacts and mitigation, as we've been proposing. There have been minor plan changes all during this process. There's been quite a bit of discussion about what is regulated by the tree law and what isn't. So we did, at the Planning Department's request, submit a letter summarizing that, those issues. Just bring that letter up for myself here a second.
I could bring it up soon.
Okay.
Oh, hold on.
Oh.
There you go.
Well, regarding trees to be removed from the actual subject development parcel outside of the wetland buffer, 123 trees by our count will be removed for this location. Additionally, there it is. Additionally, within the wetland buffer itself, 40 trees will be removed. We did go through and do a second count to confirm based on last changes that were made just before the last meeting, and that count now for trees being removed in the buffer is 40 trees. To partially offset that removal of trees both in and out of the buffer, 30 trees are going to be planted outside of the wetland buffer as part of the landscaping plan immediately in the vicinity of the new building. And an additional 50 trees will be planted on the Greenwood Street property in the area where Phragmites, native invasive species removal, will also be taking place. So we will be working to restore and upgrade an existing portion of the woodland on that Greenwood Street parcel as part of our plan to offset the loss of trees in the development area. In addition to that, trees will be planted in the wetland and wetland buffer on that Greenwood Street property on Veterans in order to restore and enhance that wetland there at the corner of the property, which again has been overrun with Phragmites and human detritus, shall we say. As part of that plan also, there are flood mitigation aspects to that, which are also incorporated in the overall larger mitigation plan. So 27 new trees will be planted in that area there on at the corner of Veterans and Greenwood Street, for a total of, I gotta total it now.
67 trees. So
107 trees altogether. 107 trees altogether, and 153 shrubs. The question did come up about whether we were only planting trees or whether there would be understory and ground level plantings done. There are, like I said, 90 shrubs proposed for the immediate parcel, and an additional 62 shrubs in the buffer and wetland areas, both on site and on the Greenwood Street parcel. And those areas that'll be disturbed by the removal of the invasive material, invasive species, will also be reseeded with appropriate native seed mixes that include a mixture of herbaceous species as well as some shrub species, which will be able to get established on the site. And I did, as part of that, as part of the submission today, I wanted to, at the last meeting we had discussed, at the hearing, we had discussed where this property sits in the overall woodland, because there is, always concern about, is this an important part of a contiguous woodland that might serve to separate two smaller pieces into two smaller pieces, some of the woodland there. So I did present a graphic that I think Tom has, showing where this site is relative to the overall woodland areas in the vicinity, particularly to the east of the site. This site is at the extreme western edge of what is defined by the town law as woodlands, and is, as we pointed out, nestled between 3 commercial properties. So from an overall functional standpoint, this woodland is certainly on the fringe of much larger and more well-developed and preserved woodland areas to the east. I think that covers what the follow-up today was about.
Okay. Have you had the chance to see the additional comments we got from residents in reference to?
I have not. No, Joe, I don't believe Joe or I have seen those.
I have not. Okay. Robin, is there a way to share those on the screen, or you want me to?
Are they in the book, Tom?
Yeah, there's one. The one in particular.
Yeah.
Oh, what happened?
That's just Joe. Which one?
So I think the one from Linda Miller is the most detailed.
Okay.
I gotta say, I think this might be easier than meeting in the boardroom. At least some
ways.
All right, so I don't know if you want me to read this or we could just scroll through it. Is there any way to enlarge it at all, or?
It's filling my whole screen.
Oh,
Not.
probably my old computer. All right, so, I think basically I guess we can go through it. She writes, the tree and woodland preservation law recognizes that trees need to be cut and woodlands disturbed, even cleared, accommodate reasonable development. But these activities require a permit with attached mitigation measures. Mitigation for lost trees and woodland in the town's strategy for accomplishing the often opposing goals of a natural resource protection in the face of reasonable necessary development. And she goes, I don't know how I can control yours, so I'm not arguing against the location of the Atlantic Compliance building on the site, and I recognize the trees and woodlands will need to be destroyed, but the point is that the planning board did not give a hard, professional, data-driven look at the ecological functions carried out by the site trees and woodlands in order to determine mitigation measures. Please excuse my reading and my lisp. I think there are two reasons for the deficiency. The planning board erroneously thinks the wetland mitigation suffices for tree and woodland mitigation. The planning board seems to agree with the characterization of the site's woodlands as compromised and low quality. Can wetland mitigation appropriately do double duty as tree and wetland mitigation? According to 270-5K of the Tree and Woodland Preservation Law, the trees and woodland in the wetland and wetland buffer on the two Atlantic appliance parcels come under the purview of 178 Freshwater Wetlands Law as wetland mitigation. The plan is to restore the wetlands by removing trash, removing invasive, planting native species of saplings and shrubs, seeding with native species, deer fencing, and creation of a pocket wetland. These measures will go a long way toward creating a healthy wetland community that carries out the many of the important functions of wetlands. Thank you, Robin. However, the applicant maintains via Mr. Rena and Marino, and the planning board apparently concurs that these wetland measures plus landscaping of a green roof adequately mitigate the loss of the tree and woodland functions on the front 1.5 acres of the site, where the building and parking will be located. This is not correct. The upland trees and woodlands fall under the Tree and Woodland Preservation Law, not the Wetland Law. A mitigation plan for the loss of these resources should be based on a hard look at the ecological services as summarized in 270-3 provided by 125 protected trees and approximately 18 specimen trees and approximately 1.5 acres of protected woodland. The planning board did not take this hard look, but rather accepted the premise that the woodlands and wetlands can be lumped together for mitigation purposes. While there is some general overlap between the woodland and wetland functions, the goal and intent of the wetland law is to protect the wetlands, and not all the woodland functions will be captured under that rubric. Approval authorities and developers have to learn and evaluate woodlands as a valuable, complex ecosystem, not just a strand of trees or an add-on to a wetland. How does the woodland quality play into mitigation for loss of function? The planning board also has brought into the characterization of site woodland compromise and low quality. It's true that the 1.5 plus acre is not great northwoods in terms of ecological functioning, but that's not relevant comparison for determining mitigation requirements. The important question is, what ecological services does this woodland provide compared to the new proposed use of the site? The difference between those two is what we're losing, and the loss needs to be mitigated according to the Tree and Woodland Preservation. Excuse me. Why is the planning board willing to write off mitigation for the upland trees and woodlands? It is dependent on these arguments, mostly from Mr. Marino. Whole point, first one. The woodland is low quality, has little understory, and is compromised by deer grazing. Answer: while it's true that the woodlands with a complex vegetation structure are more stable and probably support a higher animal diversity in the 1.5 acres of woodland, continue very large trees, absorbs a large amount of carbon dioxide, traps a significant amount of water, and provides a significant amount of microclimate tempering. The wetland is already on site, so even though restored, it can't add or replace to the benefits subtracted from the site when the woodland is paved. Let's throw up a little more. Oh, I think you went too far. No? No. The only animals using the woodlands are birds of the unnamed species that are adapted to this sort of developed setting. Answer: How do we know this? A wildlife census was not done, or at least the methodology and results were not shared. In fact, woodlands continuous into streams and wetlands can be very valuable habitat for species that move back and forth between upland and wetland. We should be looking at the value of the natural community diversity on a larger scale. Go up a little bit. That's good, thank you. The proposed green roof mitigates for the loss of woodland ecological services. Answer: there are several ecological and economic advantages to green roofs, but these are most obvious in urban settings. There is no way a green roof can replace 1.5 plus acres of mature woodland in terms of microclimate, amelioration, wildlife habitat, oxygen generation, carbon dioxide absorption, water infiltration, and retention. While green roofs are under a distinct ecological benefit, urban concrete canyons are always trumped by natural plant communities. References showing the contrary are welcome. Landscaping can replace the functions of the trees and woodlands. Answer: landscaping can replace some of the functions of individual trees, and that it's aesthetically pleasing, helps to soften the hard surfaces on a developed site, provides buffering between commercial and residential areas. Landscape trees do not carry out some of the ecological functions as wild trees, but they cannot replace the functions of a complex woodland ecosystem. Once again, a woodland is more than a strand of trees. The proposed mitigation plans to use 4 of the 6 mitigation measures enumerated by the Tree and Woodland Preservation Law, according to Mr. Tegater. So therefore, is adequate. Answer: the list of mitigation measures in the law is not meant to be all-inclusive. The job of the approval authority is to require appropriate data-based mitigation, not to just tick off boxes. Just as it has been going on for more than 40 years with wetlands, I urge the planning board to embrace the concept of protecting woodlands as ecosystems with complex structures and functions, and to give it more independent thought, meaningful mitigation for the large tree and woodland loss proposed for the Atlantic Appliance site. And that ends the memo, or the letter N. Out of what I saw, that was the most detailed and to the point. And, you know, I think no one could dispute Linda Miller's knowledge, love of the town, and all the work she's done to create this. That being said, I know we just got a letter from Mr. Marino kind of trying to sum up. Any thoughts from the board?
Yeah,
not a problem.
I resent the implication that, you know, we just buy into Mr. Marino's snow job. I think his comments were very much to the point. I read through the minutes of the last meeting, which I did not attend, as you well know. And I thought he addressed many of the factors of the functions of a woodland and a wetland. And, you know, in fact, the application, and I have some comments on the proposed resolution, will eventually consist of a singular site. So we will refer to it as the property, but the property consists currently of two separate lots, and the wetland is not part of the first lot. You know, so the wetland is one, the woodland is the other, but the benefit to the overall ecosystem and environment, especially in this, if I want to use Ms. Miller's terms, urban concrete area of town, I think far outweighs, you know, the loss of 1.5 acres of a woodland that is several hundred acres in size, and it is at the extremity of that woodland. And we do have to take all of this into account and juggle the laws, the mitigation, the benefits to the town, the benefits to the property owner, the property owner's rights, and that's what we do. We don't simply buy into someone's argument. We do not dismiss any of the information that's brought to our attention. And I think we have a very holistic approach as to what is legally permissible, what is considered mitigation, and I think we've done that. I think we've done that with every application, and the one that we just spoke about a moment ago on Granite Springs Road, we commended the applicant for its willingness to leave some of the trees that we pointed out as a board that we thought were, really should be saved along the perimeter of the property primarily, that would not be in the area of disturbance. And that's the kind of thing we try to do. On this site, it was not possible because that first 1.5 acres is what was needed to develop the site. So what was done far in excess was to enhance part of the woodland, which happened to contain a wetland. I mean, let's not mix the whole thing up intentionally, trying to point out errors in our decision-making process. The wetland is part of the woodland. The woodland invades the wetland. So, to try and isolate the two in this circumstance, or throughout most of our town, given the unique environmental qualities and characteristics of our town, is almost impossible. There are very few high and dry woodlands, and there are very few wetlands that appear in the middle of, that are not in a woodland, so to speak. What is happening here is that the whole area, and we've seen with other applications along Greenwood Street, people that had severe concerns about flooding and what happens in the wetland that has silted up when the storm events occur because of the, what has gone on for decades and decades in the area. The properties, the residential properties along Greenwood Street, have suffered flooding conditions, et cetera, and concerns about flooding. The applications that have come before us are actually showing a positive effect on all of that, and that's not lost by myself, or I don't think any of the other members of the board. When you try to look at the mitigation as a whole, I think the woodland is enhanced by various aspects of this application. I think the wetland that is situated within that woodland is enhanced, and the functions of both are enhanced by the removal of mitigation of invasive species, and the various engineering aspects that allow in storm events, the water to flow backwards, for instance, and be stored and not flood properties along there. Yeah, it's very difficult to isolate the woodland from the wetland and vice versa, in my opinion. And I look at the mitigation, the environmental mitigations on this application as a whole. And I think probably the other members of the board do the same. And, I feel that the measures that were taken to improve aspects of this area, environmentally and in an engineering aspect, I think far outweigh the loss of 1.5 acres that is situated in between two commercial buildings on a whole commercial strip across the street from one of the largest downtown developments that we have. So, I think all of that speaks in favor of the application. I think Mr. Marino's comments, as I read them during the public meeting, the minutes that I read, I thought they were, and Steve, you weren't here, I spoke earlier of how I thought you addressed things, very articulately and very succinctly. And I think, Ms. Miller does the same. I just think that there has to be a middle ground, and I think that with this particular application, the board has sought that middle ground and appreciated the efforts that have been put forth. And, to say that we dismiss things or we don't understand things or that we buy into a certain argument, I find offensive, quite frankly. And I'm speaking in defense of all the members of the board. I don't know if they share my opinion, but I find the dismissive nature of her letter offensive.
Thank you, John. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to echo a number of comments that John just made. I read very carefully the memos that were submitted after the public hearing, as well as the comments from the public hearing itself. And I revisited the town's tree preservation law. And I think there are a number of assumptions in the last two letters that we got that are not necessarily correct. I think that the mitigation plan as a whole is satisfactory to me, because it does work in a number of ways to offset the loss of trees and woodlands that we have on this site. We're not limited to a one-for-one replacement of trees. We are not required to do that. We are not required to consider one element of mitigation. There's a series of elements over here, and if they benefit to me, both the wetlands and replacement of forests, I think that's important. One assumption that I'm making, and I believe it's in the resolution, that these two parcels are going to be combined. Is that correct? Is that one of our conditions?
Yes. Toward the end of the resolution.
Okay, if that is the case, is there some way, if it's not already in this application, of preserving the remaining open space that's not being developed at this point? Is that in the plan?
I didn't see any explicit language to that, effect, but
Well, if a
it'd be
conservation
possible to
easement is
develop
placed,
yeah, I'd welcome that.
if a conservation easement is placed on the remaining open space, that would go a long way to ease any concerns that may remain in terms of the mitigation of the loss of trees and woodlands. I was wondering if the applicant would consider placing a conservation easement on the remaining open space.
Good evening, Joe Rena. Certainly, that's something we will have to discuss with the applicant, with the property owner. I can't make that statement as of right now, but we will certainly, if he's in favor of it, we will let you know as soon as possible. But we will bring that to his attention.
Any other members of the board?
Any chance you could get in touch with him so we could
I'm gonna
vote on this resolution tonight, Joe, or is that not possible?
I'm gonna call him right now. I'm just gonna mute myself, and I'll let you guys.
All right, so we'll continue.
Okay.
John Taggart, are we missing anything?
No, I don't think so at all. I think I'm surprised a little at what was said in the memo, and maybe a couple of them. I think that even in your resolution that you were diligent in looking at both laws, the wetland and the tree law. I think you've mitigated for both appropriately. So I think you've captured everything.
Jim?
I'd just like to point out the comment that the wetland preservation and tree preservation serve different purposes may be accurate, but that doesn't mean they can't work in tandem under the right circumstances. I think here, and I have to commend the applicant for this, they've done a pretty good job of blending the two forms of mitigation together. And I think overall, I think it achieves the objectives of both laws without slavish compliance with either. I also thought that while the Mrs. Miller's letter was very well written and impressive in its own right, it was more of a general discourse on woodland and how woodlands operate, whereas the Marino letter was much more specific to this woodland and the purpose it serves on this site. And that's what I believe the mitigation that's proposed in the resolution addresses.
I'll just add my input. And I say it all the time. Property out there is like a fingerprint. They're all different. You can't handle them the same. You got to look at them on its own merits. And I think the team that the applicant put together to address these concerns was excellent. This didn't just come to us yesterday. This has been going through different iterations for some time. I think the applicant has done the absolute best they can to take the site and the comments that everybody threw at them from the various boards and put together a nice project. I also, as much as I'll say I yield to the expertise of the professionals in that field there, I look at things holistically. I think the wetlands, the trees, all that's got to work together. And there's got to be one plan that does the best to incorporate all that. Not just the fact that, when we had the application on Greenwood that there were concerns about stormwater. And I drove out there this weekend after the nice rain we got over the last few days. And listen, I hope to God that this helps. I really do. Everything they've designed, shows that it will. I think it's going to be a great asset to the residents along that road. As much as I really do appreciate the letters of concern that we got, especially from Linda Miller, she certainly is the expert in the field on this. I think the board has to look at a varying degree of everything, and I think that's been done here. So I see Joe's back. We'll let him talk.
Yes, I spoke to Mr. Vakai. Basically, he's willing to put a conservation easement or donate the parcel to the town, whatever they would like. But yes, he's willing to make an effort to preserve the parcel.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. John, so what do we do with that now? We do a bullet?
You'll add it as a requirement, and I would do it to your satisfaction. So along with the applicant's team, we can actually lay that out. It may be the entire larger parcel that is encumbered by the wetlands, but however, I would like to have a discussion after this resolution, and when we're looking at where that goes, about whether or not the stormwater measures should actually be in that conservation easement or not. I would just like to make sure of that. So
Yeah,
We want to keep them outside of it.
yeah.
And also, Rich, one of the other pieces of correspondence while we're on the topic, since you did go out to that neighborhood over the weekend, there was I think it was an email submission from one of the residents that was not familiar with the various aspects of the project, but saw a sign on the property.
Yeah.
Remember that short comment that,
Nancy Brand.
Okay, and I think she's going to be pleasantly surprised about the way that parcel looks post development.
Yes.
I think it's actually going to be a benefit to the neighborhood visually and otherwise, cleaning up that space that everybody goes by if they live in Junior Lake on a daily basis, and many other residents of the town on their way to and from the post office and shopping downtown. I mean, I think it's going to be a tremendous improvement. I completely appreciate her comments about the brook, and obviously from everything that's been explained to us, it's going to substantially, increase the health and viability of that whole area environmentally. So I think she's going to be pleasantly surprised. And, I think we always welcome comments from the public. And hopefully if she's watching tonight or sees what is going to go on afterwards, she'll feel, quite pleased with what's going on there. It begins to sound like a Cy Sims commercial after a while, but, we're not unlike a Cy Sims commercial in that an educated resident is our happiest customer. So, when they're educated about the aspects of certain developments, I think they'll have different feelings about what goes on. I have a comment of if we're ready to discuss the resolution itself. Are we moving into that at this point?
Yeah, I think, John, if you're good, Jim, Aaron, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add.
No, I do have a comment on the resolution itself, but maybe John Kincott will cover it.
Okay, John.
Just before we
As a team.
can we have somebody?
Sorry, Jim.
Can we have someone move adoption of the resolution and get a second, and then it can be discussed?
I think they want to comment on some of the verbiage, all right?
Do we go to the neg deck?
Neg deck.
Before we vote, Jim is saying before we vote on it, that we would discuss it, correct? We'll follow
Correct. We
Robert's.
just move it, second it, and have a discussion.
Okay, we got to do the neg deck first, though.
All right, so do we have the
Correct.
approval of the neg deck that we have in front of us?
Well, you have to declare lead agency.
Oh,
There you
sorry, we didn't do that.
Billy, getting
So I have a
ahead.
motion to declare the lead agency of Town of Yorktown.
I make a motion to declare the planning board as the lead agency on this application.
For a second,
Second.
all's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do I have a motion to approve the neg deck that we have in front of us?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And then on the resolution as noted, approving the site plan, special use permit, stormwater management plan, wetland permit, and tree permit for Atlantic Compliance. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
No, you're not gonna vote
Not going
yet.
to move yet.
Wait,
Discuss it.
You want to have your discussion on the modifications
I thought Jim said we should.
No, we need the motion on the floor before we can discuss it.
Okay, that's
first.
right.
The motion, so now you got to discuss your
Okay.
verbiage.
All right, John, you're on.
So, obviously, I'm going to assume that all the dates and references in terms of what went on and what we reviewed and the submission of the various maps, et cetera, and so forth, are all in order on pages 1 and 2. On page 3, I think we want to, well, first of all, in the second paragraph, the second whereas, in the last sentence, it says gross floor area and space, a total of 4 employees. So we need a space in there in that sentence, but further on and more importantly, there are areas where we speak of the property or properties, and we need, through the various corrections or additions, it doesn't always agree. So I think we're moving towards a single property still, correct?
Yes.
Joining the 2 lots, or now we steering away from that in deference to the conservation easement? I think we should treat it as one property and then put the conservation easement on a portion of the property. Is that?
I agree with that.
I agree,
Going
John.
on to it.
Okay. So in that vein then, if we can speak of the application consisting of a single property, which I don't think in any case would be inaccurate, the first sentence where we see changes, the wetland areas to enhance and preserve said areas on the property, singular, as shown in the plan set. The applicant is providing 31 shrubs around the stormwater, et cetera, and so forth, stormwater practices / pocket wetland areas on the property that encompasses, because now we're talking about this, right?
No, where are you, John?
Are we talking about multiples or singular? Areas that encompass. Okay, so if it's going to be plural there, we need to encompass as the plural. And on both lots, 31 and 35, there will be a green rooftop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As shown in the plan set, to accompany to mitigation. I think to accompany mitigation will remove that second 2. Am I correct?
Yes.
This mitigation is also being provided for the 40 trees that are to be removed from the wetland buffer area on the property. Okay. Further down, and I was counting all the trees. Steve, you did a good job, because in the column here, I was counting the trees on the side of the resolution and the number of shrubs on the right-hand column of my page in the margin. In the next paragraph, we added in the areas outside the wetland / wetland buffer on lot 31 in addition.
Can I stop you, John?
Yep.
Can I stop you?
Mm-hmm.
So, in the previous whereas, where it's in accordance with the town chapter 248, stormwater management, we state specifics, and not to say that we don't want to be specific, but we state specifics, but we have to go through the DEP approval, and some of these things may be modified or changed. I know that'll be subject to a discussion later on, but do we want to generalize that a little more, or you feel it's not a problem if they make a change and then we come back and present it to you?
Well, if they make a change, you will have to come back. So this is what, in my view, this is what they've looked at and what they're approving. So I think that's
okay. I'm fine with that. Okay.
Yeah, well, in that regard, though, what if we change the word provided to propose? The applicant has proposed stormwater plans on the property for stormwater collection, and later on, obviously, we're going to get into the various other approval authorities. Would that work, John?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think, Joe? Does that satisfy your concern?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Either way, if they change something, we're coming back anyway.
Right.
I was just trying to make it so it wasn't so complicated, if we have to come back.
The next paragraph, I wanted to, for the sake of, not having it be a confused mess, in the middle of the paragraph, it refers in black ink on lot number 35, comma, and then go into along with invasive species removal and deer fencing, because it separates the two types of mitigation as well, the plantings and the invasive species removal, et cetera, so forth. If the board is open to that. And at the very end of that paragraph on page 4, I would also like to end the sentence, these plantings are the provided mitigation for the removal of, I think in reference to the comments that were made, we may want to change this a little bit. Say these plantings are part of the provided mitigation for the removal of 123 trees to be removed from the property, period. This does not include the 40 trees to be removed that are in the wetland buffer area. If we make it two separate sentences, we're kind of separating the sites, but we're treating the property as a single property, but we're separating the two areas of the property by separating those things. And I think we want to be careful that, and perhaps this is something that would invite criticism. These plantings are the provided mitigation for the removal of 123 trees. Well, they're not the only mitigation. I think we have to be careful how we say that.
I agree. It should be these plantings are part of the provided mitigation.
Right. For all the reasons we've discussed throughout this. And then finally on page 5, additional requirements, and maybe we want to put number 2, I don't think is correct or appropriate. The submission of the wetland mitigation plan to the satisfaction of the town engineer. That's within our purview. I think we used to do things that way, but I'm not sure that we're doing that anymore. It should be the satisfaction of this board, but that's already understood whether we approve the resolution or not. Maybe we want to squeeze the submission of conservation easement on the eastern portion of the site, blah, 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 however we describe it, per Aaron's suggestion. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the one you just talked about, number 2, could be actually stricken, and you can replace it with the requirement for the conservation easement to the satisfaction of you folks, the planning board.
Okay.
Good. That's good.
So, John, should we add there that that a survey should be submitted delineating the area, delineating the area of the proposed conservation easement?
I think a drawing should, and the final easement should be done by a surveyor. But to establish what the easement will be and its limitations, I think we can do by site plan of Joe Rena. Do you agree with that, Joe?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be fine with me.
And then in number 6, I don't think we need road dedications. It's not part of this application, so we can just strike that parenthetical phrase. I mean, the phrase separated by commas there, right? I'm
Yep.
sure that's kind of a boilerplate thing, but
It is.
okay.
We'll leave easement.
Oh, I'm sorry. On the following page, 6 of 6, second paragraph. Be it now, is this the way we always phrase it? Be it now that in accordance with chapter 248, the planning board finds the stormwater mitigation in this site plan to be compliant and is to, why don't we just say, we find it, the mitigation in this site plan to be compliant and to the board's satisfaction? Why do we put the word is in there? It's awkward. And the same thing in the following, be it resolved. I mean, either way, it's clear. I just find it awkward.
Yeah, I agree. We'll take it out. If everybody agrees, yeah.
That's fine.
In the second and third, resolved. I'll shut up. Sorry.
What do you got, Aaron?
On page, what are we on? Page 4, you need to recite the adjourned public hearings on this application. You only have the April 20th hearing in there.
Okay. We'll get that in there.
Otherwise, I'm good.
Anybody else?
That's what I get for missing that meeting, Aaron.
That's right.
Rich, I have some comments.
Go ahead, Joe.
In the modified plans to show section on page 5, I thought we have dealt with items 1 or 2 already, if I'm not mistaken. And the third, we did not respond to that in writing, but that was clearly discussed or in our presentation during the public hearing at the last meeting. So do we need to address those 3 items?
John, you got any comments?
Well, number 3, I think, can come out. I agree. On number 1 and 2, either way, I mean, I don't think it is any more onerous or difficult to provide something that you've already provided, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah.
It's fun. I mean, I don't think anything will change from that. So, I mean, that's up to the board. If they want to pull that stuff out, that's fine. But number 3, definitely, I think, probably should come out.
Okay.
I just want to talk about one thing is in the town engineer's memo of June 22nd, which is in your books. There are 2 items, which is more details on proposed utility connections. Applicant should provide a pipe profile. And then the other one is provide total quantity of your water usage. You guys want to make that as a requirement?
John, as far as, yes, we promised to provide that utility profile. We'll get that on the next iteration of the plan. I think that's how we responded to that. And in regards to the water usage, that was responded to, and we, on at least 2 occasions, reminded of the town engineer that we did did respond to those and provide that information. And
Okay.
we pointed out exactly where it was. So if you want to leave it in, it's fine. But we've done that. It's kind of like I feel like I keep beating that whole thing over and over again. But
Okay, but it's fair to leave in number 1 as a condition?
yeah, absolutely. Well, we had already responded to that we knew we had to do that, and that we would do it in the final iteration of the plan.
So why don't we put that as item number 3 and replace the Tree Conservation Advisory Commission memo? If we're leaving the other 2, provide lighting, provide adequate plantings, and provide, the utility connection.
That's fine. That's a good good spot for it.
That way it's on the plan, you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's okay, right, Joe? I mean, to put it in with those?
It's okay with me, sure.
Okay, any other comments,
That's it for me.
concerns? All right, so, once again, we have a motion for the resolution approving the site plan, special use permit, stormwater management plan, wetland permit, and tree permit for Atlantic and Pines as noted.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And then we have a second resolution for the same property. Second resolution is for the special use permit for the permanent seasonal outdoor sales and commercial district for Atlantic Appliance. Any concerns?
Not on my part.
Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Joe and team, very nice job.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See Frank Giuliano again.
Frank is on. He'll,
I know, he shut his camera off.
There you go.
There he
More
is.
often. All right, guys,
thanks very much.
thank you.
Back over.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Next on the agenda, we have a public hearing for the Taco Bell Compound, locations 3605 Compound Road. Paul, you there?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Hope everyone is doing well, staying safe. For the record, my name is Paul Dumont. I'm a senior designer with JMC. We are the civil engineers on the project. Here tonight on behalf of Kai Carmel LLC with regard to the Taco Bell restaurant proposed at 3605 Crampon Road. Because tonight is a public hearing, I'll just start by giving a brief overview of the application and all the progress we made over the last few months. Just going to share my screen. For those of you that aren't familiar, the property is located on Crampon Road, about a quarter mile west of the intersection of Crampon Road and the Bear Mountain State Parkway. The property is a little over an acre in size and is bordered by the Crampon Road and Bear Mountain State Parkway lands to the north, a veterinary center and car storage lot to the west, Parkside Corner Shopping Center and vacant wooded land to the east, and Old Crampon Road and single-family residences to the south. The applicant is in a contract to purchase the property and is proposing to reoccupy the site with a Taco Bell fast food restaurant and another to-be-determined retail tenant. Just for context, the building was previously occupied by Time Restaurant and Snap Fitness. The applicant, as I said, is proposing to reoccupy the building, upgrade the facade or renovate the facade, and also construct a number of site improvements to facilitate the drive-through lane for the Taco Bell restaurant. In addition, the applicant is proposing a new curb cut exit from the drive-through window, in addition to landscaping improvements, lighting improvements, stormwater management, and wetland mitigation. So that's a very quick overview, but I'd like to just touch on some of the items that we've gone through in the last few months with your board, the planning and engineering departments, and some of the other boards in town. With regard to parking on the property, the reconfiguration of the parking lot and the site does result in a net loss of parking spaces. Currently, the plan proposes 40 parking spaces, where 49 parking spaces are required by zoning for the retail use and the Taco Bell restaurant use, which is a deficit in the requirement. The code, there is a provision in the town code that does allow your board to waive up to 25% of the required parking spaces, which we do fall under. The clause in the code requires the applicant to submit some data to support that request, which we have done. We've submitted some data from Taco Bell, we've also submitted a ULI shared parking analysis that our office has prepared, which shows basically what it does is it analyzes the peak hours of each use and uses industry data that's taken from a number of studies that's compiled by ULI. And what we've done is summarize the projected parking demand on site during a typical weekday peak hour in addition to a typical weekend peak hour. And we've shown that although the zoning requirement is not met, in our opinion, we believe that the site will be adequately parked for the two uses. In addition, throughout the review process, we've worked with the Bureau of Fire Prevention and the town fire inspector to address their concerns on the property. Fire hydrant accessibility on this stretch of Compton Road is problematic for the fire department, which we recognize. The applicant is proposing. Can everyone still see my screen? Sorry.
Yeah.
The applicant, as you can see here on this map, the nearest hydrants are quite a ways down Compton Road on either side, which is not conducive to fighting a fire along the center stretch. The applicant has agreed to install a fire hydrant on the property, which will be a public fire hydrant available for use by the fire department on this property and the other properties along this stretch. That has addressed the Bureau of Fire Prevention's concerns with regard to fire hydrant accessibility. With regard to sanitary sewer usage, the applicant is proposing to reuse the existing sanitary sewer line that comes out of the building today. The building currently is served by a private pump station that exists approximately in this location on the site. From there, sanitary sewer flows are pumped into a force main where flows are directed to a gravity line on Old Compton Road. From there, flows go to the Hunter Brook pump station, which we understand is at capacity. Mr. Quinn and the engineering department requested that we do an analysis of the existing and projected.
Excuse me.
Our office has prepared an engineering report which demonstrates, based on projections in addition to data collected from other Taco Bell restaurants, we've showed that the proposed sanitary sewer flows that are projected under proposed conditions do not exceed those under existing conditions. So we believe we've addressed that with the engineering department. Another item I'd just like to note, the property does have a culvert, a stormwater culvert that crosses the parking lot. An 84-inch corrugated metal pipe. It is a stream that is piped. It begins across Compton Road on the Bear Mountain State Parkway lands, enters a head wall that is to the west of the veterinary site, approximately here, and then crosses these three properties and daylights just to the east of the subject property. The engineering department has requested that the applicant inspect that culvert to ensure that it is ensure its integrity and also to establish a benchmark of its condition before construction, which the applicant has done and submitted. The culvert is in good condition. With regard to, while we're on that topic, there is a delineated wetland and a 100-foot locally regulated wetland buffer on the property that's associated with the stream, in addition to an area in the rear of the property. We are proposing disturbance within the 100-foot buffer. We're proposing mitigation in the form of the restoration of the stormwater practice in the rear of the property, in addition to a number of plantings that we've coordinated with Evans Associates, who is the wetland consultant that worked on the original Taste of Italy application. We have vetted that with the Conservation Board and have closed that loop. We are also in the DEP watershed, So part of what we are doing in the rear of the property is to address the DEP jurisdiction on the property. DEP regulates new impervious surfaces. So we worked with DEP to have a SWIP approved for the project. Pleased to report last week that the DEP did issue a SWIP approval for the project. So we worked through a number of their concerns and have addressed that. So the new stormwater practice will provide water quality, et cetera, for the entire site. And lastly, I'd just like to also point out that the new curb cut exit will require a state DOT approval. As your board is aware, we've been working with the DOT on this. As of last week, the DOT has completed their stage 1 review, and they issued a comment memorandum. We're working to address these comments, and obviously we'll keep the planning department and your board informed as we continue to work with the DOT on that. With that said, I think that's everything I wanted to cover. There was a planning department memorandum issued Friday. We did have an opportunity to speak with the planning department, and we don't have an issue with any of the comments outlined. We will be refining our parking calculations and making the other modifications as suggested in the memorandum. So.
Okay, you're all set, Paul?
Yep, thank you.
All right. Any of the members of the board have any comments, concerns?
No, but looking at the, well, just one quick comment, no concerns, but I do like the way that soft curve for the curb cut that you're going to be asking for. Is that I think we discussed this before, Paul. That is the reestablishment of a former curb cut, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There was a curb cut previously, many years ago, when the deli first opened, I believe.
Right. Okay, and I just want that to be part of the record, and also the way that you have that soft curve in there, I think really promotes the traffic moving in. It lets people know ahead of time that they're only going to be going out in one direction, rather than getting to the intersection and seeing a sign. So, I think I have to commend you on that. I know that was in response to one of the board members' comments earlier, but. Looking at the plan again, especially where it meets the improved roadway, I think it really it looks like it's really going to address our former concern.
Yep, and that was also a concern of the DOT, and just want to make it clear too that layout isn't finalized. Where the DOT didn't have any specific concerns about the channelization there, but you're correct that the intent was to channelize the right. The biggest concern of the DOT basically is, although restricted, they're concerned that someone will still make a left. So we are working to, and obviously trying to channelize that as much as possible to prevent that. So.
Okay, anybody else from the board? John?
I don't have any comments other than to say that as far as DOT is concerned, what they are doing along this corridor very often is eliminating access and curb cuts. So just for the board's knowledge of that. Other than that, I don't have any comments.
Yes, John, you're 100% right. And I do just want to say for the record, and I will, John, we just received this late last week. I don't know if you received the same memorandum from the DOT. But the memo did not contain anything specifically negative or not supportive of the new driveway. The DOT has a number of items that they'd like to see addressed. However, it appears that although they are trying to reduce curb cuts, et cetera, along the stretch of road, it seems that they are in support of this curb cut.
Yeah, there's a number of properties along the roadway that have more than two, so they definitely hone in on those. One other thing, Rich, is that as far as the parking demand of 49, we have been looking at the floor plan, and as you know, as a restaurant, there is a different parking demand, which is one space for every 50 square feet of patron space, and one space for every 100 square feet of prep space. We think that there is actually a lower demand here that we began to talk with Paul about, but we'll be working on that the next coming week or so.
Thank you.
That's great. And, you know, just for the general public, if they're tuning in, east of this parcel, and well, you can flip back to your aerial shot if you want. I think one of the reasons why perhaps the DOT is not going to have a particular issue with I'm going to call it the reestablishment of the driveway, not the new driveway, but the reestablishment of the driveway is that large vacant parcel, you know, next door, at least at present. There's good line of sight, and, you know, I don't think it's really, aside from their concerns, if someone is going to try to attempt a left-hand turn out of there, I think obviously there's no interference with any other use immediately to the east. And perhaps that's working in your favor at this point.
Yeah, that is, you're correct, John. Yep. There is good sight distance there. So again, we don't have the final sign off, but we're working on it, and we'll obviously keep everyone updated as we keep going. So.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Jim, we missing anything on your end?
No, I think you're good.
All right, we will open it up to the public then. If anybody would like to speak to the application, please instant message Robin or put the hand up to wave. I'll give you a few minutes.
Rich, I will add that the public notices are in and they're good. They're set for the public hearing.
Thank you, Thomas.
I don't see anyone that wants to comment, Rich.
All right, Robin. That being said, I've been asked you can close the public hearing, leave a 10-day written if you want, and let the planning department work on the resolution. If there's any issues, do they have any issues? Then I'll have, do I have a motion to close the public hearing and leave a 10-day written comment, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. That is going to end the regular portion of our meeting. We're going to move to the work session. Do I have a motion to close the meeting and move into the work session, please?
All moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Take care, everybody.
Good night, Tom. Good night, Paul.
Yeah.